Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The air within Wyndemere was always thick with history, a chilling amalgamation of old stone, salt spray from the lake, and the lingering specters of its tumultuous past. It was a place built on foundations of madness, betrayal, and dark romance, and on this particular evening, it seemed the great house was preparing to add another harrowing chapter to its legacy. The news, delivered in frantic, hushed tones and then broadcast across Port Charles in a whirlwind of gossip and fear, was as simple as it was terrifying. In addition to Anna Devane, 2 more people had been kidnapped and brought to the brooding island fortress. The phrase "brought to Wyndemere" carried a weight unique to the city. It was not merely a change of location, but a descent into a gothic labyrinth from which some never truly escaped. The initial focus, understandably, had been on Anna. Anna Devane, the legendary former WSB agent, a woman of immense poise and capability, had been snatched from her life, a move so audacious it pointed to a foe of significant cunning and resources. Her absence sent ripples of panic through the foundations of Port Charles. Dante Falconeri, her son-in-law, had mobilized what resources he could, but the jurisdiction of the PCPD over the Cassadine island was perpetually murky, a legal gray area the family had exploited for generations. Laura Collins, the city's beloved commissioner and a woman whose own history with the Cassadines was woven into the very stone of Wyndemere, felt a familiar dread coiling in her stomach. It was a feeling she had hoped was consigned to her past, a cold echo from the days of Stavros and his obsessions. But the revelation that there were 2 other souls trapped within those walls shifted the dynamic entirely. It was no longer a targeted, if brutal, strike against a single individual. It was a gathering. A collection. And the question of who and why now hung over the city like a shroud. The spoilers, those tantalizing fragments of future narrative, offered no names, only the chilling fact of their existence. This ambiguity became a breeding ground for theories, each more frightening than the last. The first and most pressing theory centered on those closest to the current Cassadine core. Valentine Cassadine, despite his recent strides toward a semblance of redemption, could never fully shed the shadow of his name. He had been a wild card, a master of playing all sides against the middle. Had he finally overplayed his hand? Or had an old enemy from his days in the WSB or the depths of the criminal underworld decided to use Wyndemere as his cage? Then there was Charlotte Cassadine, his daughter, a young woman who had already endured more trauma and manipulation than anyone her age should. Her link to the Cassadine legacy was both a source of privilege and a target on her back. The idea of her being a captive in her own ancestral home was a particularly cruel twist that had Laura Collins reaching for the phone, her voice trembling as she tried to reach Valentine. Others looked toward the Quartermaines, whose fortunes and misfortunes were so often intertwined with the Cassadines. Could it be Lois Cerullo, whose vibrant spirit and connection to Brooklyn made her a potential pawn in a game targeting Ned or the power of ELQ? Or perhaps it was Brooklyn Quartermaine herself, whose recent successes in the music industry and with deception had made her a highly visible figure. Her kidnapping would be a blow to multiple sectors of Port Charles society, from corporate to entertainment. The medical community was not immune. The doctors of General Hospital often found themselves on the front lines of the city's chaos. Dr. Hamilton Finn, with his own complicated history and his relationship to Anna, could be a target. His daughter, Violet, though thankfully likely too well protected, represented a vulnerability of the most devastating kind. Dr. Elizabeth Weber, whose quiet strength had seen her through countless tragedies, had ties to the Cassadines through her sons and her own past. Her abduction would strike at the heart of the hospital and the Spencer family. And then there were the wild cards, the individuals whose presence in Wyndemere would be so shocking as to redefine the entire conflict. Could it be Sonny Corinthos? To kidnap the most powerful criminal element in the city and bring him to the domain of his sometimes ally, sometimes rival, Victor Cassadine's remaining network, would be a declaration of war unlike any other. Or perhaps it was Jason Morgan, the man whose very return from the dead had sent shockwaves through the city. To have him imprisoned in Wyndemere would be a symbolic victory for any enemy, a way to cage the legendary enforcer. The possibility of it being Carly Spencer, the woman at the center of so many storms, could not be discounted. Her fierce loyalty and protective nature made her a weapon that could be used against Sonny, against Drew, against a multitude of players. This proliferation of theories created a citywide atmosphere of paranoia. trust, that most fragile of commodities in Port Charles, began to erode at an accelerated pace. Alliances were questioned. Motives were scrutinized. Every closed door, every whispered conversation, was viewed with suspicion. The knowledge that 3 people were suffering within Wyndemere, their identities unknown, made every family wonder if their loved one was the second or third victim. It was a psychological masterstroke by the unseen antagonist, a way to torment the entire community without having to lift a finger against them directly. Inside Wyndemere, the reality was both more mundane and more horrifying than any outside speculation. The grand hallways, lined with portraits of stern-faced Cassadines from generations past, felt like a gallery of judges presiding over a private hell. The air was cold, carrying the damp chill from the lake that seeped through the ancient stone walls. The only sounds were the distant cry of gulls, the mournful sigh of the wind through unseen cracks, and the heavy, echoing footsteps of their captors. Anna Devane, ever the professional, had used the initial hours of her confinement to assess her situation with a clinical detachment that belied her fear. She was being held in a room on the 3rd floor, one that was lavishly appointed but ultimately a gilded cage. The door was reinforced, the single window offered a breathtaking but useless view of the churning, gray lake, and the bars on it were a recent, unwelcome addition. She had tested the door, the walls, the floorboards, her trained eyes searching for any weakness. She had been provided with food and water, suggesting her captors wanted her alive and relatively healthy, for now. This was not a spontaneous act of violence, it was a calculated move. But to what end? Interrogation? Leverage? Or was she merely a piece in a larger, more complex game? The arrival of the 2 other captives had answered some questions while raising a legion of others. She had heard the commotion the night before, muffled shouts, the scuffle of feet on the grand staircase, the slam of heavy doors in distant wings of the mansion. She didn't know who they were, only that she was no longer alone in her nightmare. This changed the tactical landscape. If an opportunity for escape arose, it would now involve coordinating with at least 2 other people, whose states of mind and physical condition were complete unknowns. Were they civilians, terrified and panicked? Or were they, like her, individuals with skills that could be turned against their captors? The not knowing was a potent form of torture in itself. In another part of the vast mansion, in a room that had once been a lady's sitting room but now felt like a tomb, the second kidnapped victim was grappling with their new reality. Let us imagine, for the sake of this unfolding drama, that it is Dr. Lucas Jones. Lucas, a man of science and reason, found the gothic absurdity of his situation almost laughable, if it weren't so terrifying. He had been taken from the parking garage of General Hospital, a black bag thrown over his head, and transported in the trunk of a car to what he could only assume was a boat. The journey across the water had been brief but nauseating. When the bag was finally removed, he was in a room with faded velvet drapes and a cold fireplace. His mind raced. Why him? He wasn't a spy, a mobster, or a corporate titan. He was a surgeon. The only connection he could fathom was through his family. His mother, Bobby, had been a cornerstone of the city for decades, but she was gone. His sister, Carly, was a perpetual lightning rod for trouble. Was this about her? Was he a message to Carly? Or was it related to his work at the hospital? Had he inadvertently seen something or someone he shouldn't have? The lack of a clear motive was maddening. He tried to engage his captors, a pair of silent, grim-faced men who delivered his meals, but they offered nothing, not even a glance that acknowledged him as a human being. He was an object, a piece of property. He spent his days pacing the perimeter of the room, his surgeon's hands, tools of precision and healing, clenched into useless fists. The 3rd captive was being held in the old dungeon, a part of Wyndemere that the Cassadines preferred to pretend didn't exist, but which had seen more than its share of suffering over the centuries. This space was devoid of any gilded pretense, it was raw stone, damp earth, and the smell of rust and decay. Here, the chill was bone deep. Let us imagine this prisoner is Cody Bell. Cody, a man who had lived a life on the fringes, who had faced danger and desperation in many forms, found that nothing had prepared him for the sheer, oppressive weight of Wyndemere. He had been grabbed off the street near the Port Charles garage, a place he considered his own territory. The attack had been brutal and efficient. His captivity was different from the others. His guards seemed to take a particular pleasure in his discomfort, his meals were sparse and often spoiled, and the threats were more explicit. It was clear to Cody that he was considered the most disposable of the three. His mind, sharpened by years of hustling and surviving, worked overtime. Why was he here? What possible value did he have to these people? His connection to the Cassadines was tenuous at best, primarily through his friendship with Sasha and his complicated relationship with Mac and the police. Was it about the stolen jewels from months ago? Was it a warning to Mac Scorpio? Or was it something even more obscure, related to his own mysterious past and the father he never knew? The pieces wouldn't fit. He was a grunt, a street-level player, in a game that was being played on a global, cinematic scale. The mismatch was terrifying. It meant the rules he understood didn't apply here. The separation of the three captives was clearly a deliberate strategy. Alone, they were isolated, vulnerable, and easier to break. They could not pool their knowledge, share their strengths, or devise a unified plan. They were three individual problems for their captor to manage, rather than a single, unified threat. This pointed to a mind that understood the psychology of imprisonment, that knew hope could be extinguished most effectively through solitude. And then, the question of the captor. Who could be behind this? The obvious suspect was a remnant of Victor Cassadine's organization. Victor's grand, world-ending schemes had been thwarted, but a man of his resources and fanaticism would have had contingencies, loyalists who had gone to ground and were now activating a new plan. Perhaps this was not about world domination, but about revenge, a punitive strike against those who had brought down their leader. Anna was a key figure in that fight. But why Lucas? Why Cody? Another possibility was a resurgent Stavros, or someone operating in his name. Stavros's obsession with Laura had been passed down, in a twisted way, to his son, Nicholas. The cycle of Cassadine madness was a vicious one. Could a new player be invoking the name and methods of Stavros to reignite old wars? The use of Wyndemere as a prison certainly fit his modus operandi. Or perhaps the mastermind was someone entirely unexpected, someone using the Cassadine history and infrastructure as a convenient backdrop for their own personal vendetta. The list of people in Port Charles with a grudge long enough and deep enough to orchestrate a triple kidnapping was dishearteningly long. From the ashes of Peter August's machinations to the fallout from Cyrus Renault's reign of terror, there was no shortage of candidates. Back in Port Charles, the search was escalating from a quiet investigation into a citywide crisis. Dante Falconeri, his face a mask of grim determination, stood over a map of the lake spread across his desk at the PCPD. "We have to get a team out there," he insisted to his mother, Laura. "We have probable cause. We have multiple eyewitness accounts of suspicious activity near the docks leading to Spoon Island." Laura's expression was pained, the weight of her dual roles as commissioner and Cassadine historian bearing down on her. "Dante, you know it's not that simple. Wyndemere is private property. The Cassadines have lawyers who will tie us up in court for years if we breach their sovereignty without ironclad evidence. Suspicious activity isn't enough. We need proof that a crime is actively being committed there right now. What more proof do we need?" Dante shot back, his voice rising. "Anna is missing. 2 other people are missing. And all signs point to that island." "Signs and feelings aren't evidence a judge will accept to storm a private residence," Laura replied, her voice steady but filled with a mother's anguish. She knew better than anyone what Wyndemere was capable of. "We are doing everything we can legally. We have wiretaps on the main landline, we're monitoring boat traffic, we're interviewing every informant we have. But if we move too soon and we're wrong, we lose any chance of getting them back safely. We tip our hand." The frustration in the room was palpable. The system, designed to protect the innocent, was now being used as a shield by the guilty. Or perhaps, by the mad. Meanwhile, in the corridors of General Hospital, the atmosphere was one of subdued panic. The staff was on edge, the rumor mill working overtime. Liesl Albrecht, her face etched with a rare and genuine fear, cornered Kevin Collins in his office. "They have her, Kevin," she said, her German accent thicker with emotion. "They have Anna. In that house of horrors. We cannot sit here and analyze our dreams while she is there. Kevin, ever the calm voice of psychiatry, tried to soothe her. Liesel, I share your concern. Deeply. But Dante and Laura are handling this. We must trust in the process. The process? Albrecht spat the word. The process is what allowed Victor to build his machine under the Metro Court. The process is what allowed Peter August to wreak havoc for years. I have seen what the process does. It creates paperwork while monsters act. Her eyes glinted with a dangerous light. It was the same light that had once made her a formidable enemy, but was now fueled by a desperate love for her friend. Perhaps it is time for less process and more action. In another part of town, at the Metro Court, Carly Spencer was pouring a stiff drink for herself and Sam McCall. The news had spread like wildfire, and the two women, both of whom had faced their own share of kidnappings and imprisonments, felt a cold dread. 3 people, Sam murmured, staring into her glass. Who are the other 2? Is it Drew? Is it Danny? The possibility that it could be her son sent a fresh wave of terror through her. We can't think like that, Carly said, though her own mind was racing through a similar list of names: Joss, Michael, Donna, Avery. We have to be logical. This feels specific. It feels Cassadine. And when it comes to the Cassadines, the only person who might have a clue what's going on is, she didn't finish the sentence, but Sam knew. The same name was on both their minds, Ava Jerome. Ava, the current mistress of Wyndemere, was a wild card. She had loved Nicholas Cassadine, she had borne his child, and she had survived the snake pit of his family through a combination of wit, ruthlessness, and sheer force of will. But where did her loyalties lie now? Was she a potential victim unaware of the drama unfolding in her own home? Was she a collaborator? Or was she a prisoner in all but name? The scene shifted to the Jerome Gallery, where Ava was attempting to maintain a facade of normalcy. She was curating a new collection, her movements precise and elegant, but her eyes, those famously perceptive eyes, kept darting towards the window that faced the lake. She was jumpy. When Nina Reeves arrived, unannounced, Ava's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. Ava, you've heard the rumors, Nina began, cutting straight to the chase. About Wyndemere. I hear many rumors, Nina. It's Port Charles's primary export, Ava deflected, turning to adjust a painting on the wall. Don't play games with me, Nina insisted, her voice low and urgent. People are saying that Anna and 2 others are being held there. In your house. Do you know anything about this? Ava turned slowly, her gaze meeting Nina's. It was a look filled with a complex mixture of fear, defiance, and a deep, weary resentment. My house, she said softly. You think Wyndemere has ever truly been anyone's house? It is an entity, Nina. It consumes people. It twists them. Nicholas learned that. Spencer learned that. I have fought every day to not let it consume me. She took a step closer. If something is happening there, I can assure you, I am the last person who would be consulted. But I am also, perhaps, the one who is in the most danger. Her words were a confession and a warning. She was implying that she, too, was a potential target, that her position was precarious. But was she telling the truth, or was this a masterful performance to distance herself from the crimes? In the world of the Cassadines, the line between victim and villain was often blurred beyond recognition. As night fell over Port Charles, the sense of impending doom reached a fever pitch. At the PCPD, a break finally came. An anonymous tip, called in from a burner phone, claimed to have seen 2 unconscious individuals being carried off a private boat at the Wyndemere dock late the previous night. The description of one of them, a man in a doctor's coat, matched Lucas Jones's last known whereabouts. It was the thread of evidence Dante needed. That's it, he declared, grabbing his jacket. We're moving. I'm putting a team together. We're going to Spoon Island. Laura, her face pale but resolved, nodded. The legal risks were immense, but the human cost of inaction was now greater. I'll coordinate from here. Dante, be careful. Assume everyone in that house is armed and dangerous. Simultaneously, a different, more clandestine operation was being organized. Liesl Albrecht, having found no solace in Kevin's counsel, had reached out to the only person she believed could operate outside the constraints of the process, Sonny Corinthos. In the back room of his coffee warehouse, Sonny listened as Albrecht laid out her fears and her plea. "They have her, Sonny," Albrecht said, her voice raw. "Anna. And others. The police are hamstrung by their rules. You are not. I am asking you. I am begging you, to do what you do best." Sonny, his expression unreadable, poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He pushed one towards Albrecht. "Anna's a friend," he said quietly. "And nobody gets to turn my city into a hunting ground." He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over a contact. It was time to mobilize his own resources. The PCPD would take the front door. Sonny Corinthos would ensure there was no back door for the kidnappers to escape through. Back inside Wyndemere, the 3 captives remained in their isolated cells, unaware of the forces converging upon their prison. Anna continued her methodical search for weaknesses, finding a loose nail in the floorboard that she carefully worked free. A small, pathetic weapon, but a weapon nonetheless. Lucas, in his room, had managed to pry up a loose piece of the ornate baseboard, hoping to find a way into the walls, or at least a place to hide if his captors came for him with more sinister intentions. Cody, in the dungeon, was using a sharp piece of stone to slowly, painstakingly, scrape at the rusted hinges of his cell door. It was a futile effort, he knew, but the action itself was a rebellion. It was a way to hold on to his sanity. The stage was set. The players were in position. In the grand, tragic theater of Wyndemere, a confrontation was brewing that would test the courage of the captives, the resolve of their rescuers, and the very soul of a city forever marked by the shadow of the Cassadine family. The spoilers had promised a kidnapping, a gathering of souls in the stone fortress. But they could not capture the full depth of the fear, the desperation, and the fragile, flickering hope that now burned within its cold walls. The truth of who was taken, and why, was a mystery still locked away, waiting for the storm to break. Wyndemere stood tall on Spoon Island that night, its Gothic walls cloaked in fog and mystery. The wind howled off the harbor, and the crashing waves below echoed like a warning. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and thick with unease. Anna Devane had already been there for what felt like hours, tied to a chair in one of the candle-lit chambers deep in the mansion. Her eyes darted toward the heavy wooden door every few seconds, listening for any sound that might signal movement. She had tried to keep her composure, but the reality of being kidnapped was sinking in fast. "You're not going to get away with this," Anna muttered to the dark silhouette pacing just out of the light. Her captor didn't respond, just smiled faintly before turning away, the creak of their boots echoing through the empty hall. But Anna wasn't the only one there. A new sound broke the silence, a muffled struggle, followed by the unmistakable clatter of boots and the dragging of something. I was just leaving the hospital when someone grabbed me. They put something over my face. Next thing I know, I'm here." Anna's stomach twisted. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting her anymore. This was bigger. The captor stepped closer, revealing a familiar yet chilling face under the flickering light. "Welcome to Wyndemere," they said with a cold smirk. The voice was unmistakable, it was Valentine Cassadine. Anna's jaw tightened. "Valentine, what are you doing? You said you were done with this madness." Valentine's expression was unreadable, torn between anger and guilt. "You think I wanted this?" he said quietly. "I didn't. But someone else has plans that go far beyond what you can imagine." Dante lunged forward, but the ropes kept him restrained. "Where's Charlotte? What did you do with her?" Valentine's face darkened at the mention of his daughter. "She's safe," he said. "Safer than any of you right now." Elizabeth swallowed hard, her nurse's instincts trying to make sense of it all. "Valentine, if you're not the one behind this, then who is?" The question hung in the air like a ghost. A sudden noise outside the room interrupted the conversation, the sharp click of heels on the stone floor. Valentine froze. "She's here," he whispered, almost to himself. the door creaked open again, and out of the shadows stepped a woman dressed in black, her face partially hidden beneath a veil. When she lifted it, Anna's blood ran cold. "Helena Cassadine," Anna breathed. "You're supposed to be dead." Helena's smirk widened as she circled the room. "Oh, my dear Anna. You should know better by now. Cassadines never truly die." The shock hit everyone at once. Dante's face hardened. "You're behind this?" Helena's laugh filled the room, low and haunting. "You could say that. Though behind isn't quite accurate. I've been in control all along." She turned to Valentine, who stood frozen in guilt and anger. "And my dear grandson, you've been such a disappointment. I gave you every opportunity to prove yourself, yet here you are, protecting the very people who should have been eliminated." Valentine's voice was rough. "You're insane." Helena tilted her head, unfazed. "Perhaps. But unlike you, I'm not weak." Anna tried to steady her breathing. "What do you want, Helena?" "You've already lost everything, your fortune, your power." Helena cut her off with a sharp wave. "What I want, my dear, is legacy. The Cassadine name has been dragged through the mud long enough. It's time to reclaim what's ours. And you," she said, pointing at Anna, "you and your little friends have stood in my way for too long." Elizabeth took a cautious step forward, voice trembling. "You don't have to do this. Whatever you're planning, it doesn't have to end like this." Helena's eyes flashed. "Oh, but it does. Because this isn't about you, Nurse Weber. It's about the secrets you've all been keeping. Secrets that will finally destroy Port Charles." Meanwhile, back in town, the news of Anna's disappearance had shaken everyone at the PCPD. Jordan Ashford was pacing her office, clutching the latest report. "We've searched every known Cassadine property," she said. "There's no trace." Sonny Corinthos stood in the corner, his jaw tight. "You're missing something. Spoon Island hasn't been checked yet." Jordan frowned. "We don't have probable cause." Sonny's tone darkened. "Then I'll make my own." Before Jordan could stop him, Sonny stormed out, pulling out his phone. "Brick, I need a boat. Now." Back at Wyndemere, the captives were growing desperate. Dante had managed to loosen his ropes just enough to whisper to Anna. "If I can get to the door, I can take her down." Anna shook her head slightly. "You don't understand. Helena always has backup." But Dante wasn't listening, he was already scanning the room for any kind of weapon. Elizabeth leaned closer to Anna. "She mentioned secrets, what is she talking about?" Anna hesitated. "Years ago, I thought Helena was gone for good. But there were files, classified information about a project connected to Victor Cassadine. If Helena got her hands on them," Elizabeth's eyes widened. "She could blackmail half of Port Charles." Helena clapped her hands suddenly, as if reading their thoughts. "Still scheming, are we?" "I do admire your spirit, Anna. But I'm afraid it's wasted here." She motioned toward the guards at the door. "Take them to the East Wing. I have preparations to make." Valentine stepped forward. "Don't do this. You're making a mistake." Helena's laugh was venomous. "You've already made mine for me, dear boy. You should have remembered your place." As the guards dragged Anna, Dante, and Elizabeth down the long, echoing corridor, Valentine was left standing alone, powerless. When the captives were gone, Helena turned back to Valentine. "You're going to help me, whether you like it or not," she said. "The serum is nearly complete." Valentine's eyes narrowed. "You're trying to bring Victor's experiment back to life?" Helena smiled wickedly. "Not trying, my dear. Succeeding. And once I do, the world will know the Cassadine name again, starting with Port Charles." At that moment, on the mainland, Sonny and Dante's partner, Sam McCall, were closing in on Spoon Island. "You sure this is smart?" Sam asked as they loaded into the small speedboat. Going in without backup? Sunny's eyes were cold and determined. They have Anna. And now they have Dante. I'm not waiting for a warrant. Sam nodded, clutching her flashlight tightly. The boat cut through the waves, the dark outline of Wyndemere growing larger with each passing minute. You feel that? Sunny said quietly. That's not just wind. That's trouble. Back inside, Dante finally managed to break free, the rope snapping under the strain. He motioned to Elizabeth, who stayed quiet as he crept toward the door. Stay behind me, he whispered. Anna looked up. Dante, don't, but it was too late. The door swung open, and one of Helena's guards was waiting with a gun. Going somewhere? The man sneered. Dante lunged forward, knocking the gun away, and chaos erupted. Elizabeth screamed as Anna kicked her chair backward to break her restraints. The struggle was loud enough that it carried down the hall. Helena appeared moments later, fury in her eyes. You never learn, do you? She spat, raising a pistol of her own. But before she could fire, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the corridor. Sunny and Sam had arrived, breaking through one of the mansion's side windows. Drop it, Helena! Sunny barked, aiming his weapon. Helena's eyes gleamed. Ah, Mr. Corinthos. Always so dramatic. She turned her gun toward Anna instead. You wouldn't dare, Anna said calmly, though her pulse was racing. Try me, Helena hissed. But before she could pull the trigger, Valentine rushed from behind, tackling her to the floor. The gun went off, the bullet shattering a mirror behind them. In the confusion, Dante grabbed Elizabeth's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Move! The halls of Wyndemere became chaos, guards shouting, gunfire echoing, and the storm outside raging harder than ever. Valentine pinned Helena down, shouting, It's over, grandmother! Let it go! But Helena's laughter cut through the noise. It's never over, my dear. Then, as lightning flashed through the window, she slipped a small vial from her coat, a vial glowing faintly green. Anna saw it immediately. Valentine, stop her! But before he could react, Helena hurled the vial against the floor, and it shattered. A strange,